has taught the practice of Buddhism to audiences across the country and the world. Her books include The Human Encounter with Death, The Fruitful Darkness, Simplicity in the Complex, A Buddhist Life in America, Being with Dying, and Seeing Inside. Dear friends, please stand and give a very warm, rousing welcome to my dear friend, Roshi Joan Halifax.
Thank you, Father John. Thank you, everybody. I don't want to tease you too much, Father John, but you don't tend toward hyperbole. Now the expectations are so high, failure will be normal. I am almost afraid to say another word. Today has been an ocean of words coming out of wisdom, words coming out of experience, words coming out of compassion, words that stimulate moral outrage, words that maybe even activate a sense of trauma for some people in the room. Words that remind us of how much structural violence there is in our world today. And I was also so moved by Reverend Lawson's deep roots in data, in history. This is just not a matter of the heart, but we have to stand in the strength of whatever current information we can access about what is happening in the world of violence. I remember years ago, Jim Lovelock, who is now, or in his older years, was advocating nuclear power, but I knew him before. Thank Buddha. And he was pointing in a very deep way to the slow bomb of climate change. Slow bomb is a term I just picked up from the writer Rebecca Solnit. You know, there's the fast bomb that they make at Los Alamos, and then there's the slow bomb of climate change. And that slow bomb comes, what Lovelock said, really out of the 3 C's. And one of those C's is chainsaws, the release of, incredible carbon, the cutting down of our boreal forests, our equatorial forests. The second C that Lovelock, and this was 40 years ago, pointed to was the sea of cars. All of the means of transport that brought us here. We're in the system. And it's the sea of cattle. It's really hard when our dietary preferences are addressed, but the methane produced and the waste produced by the animal industry is really astonishing when you begin to consider its effect on our atmosphere. Chainsaws, cars, cattle, chickens, the whole thing, rabbits, the whole thing. And today has been, in a certain way, I feel almost
Here we can use this. Testing.
How's that? I feel almost irradiated by the day. I'm just kind of on overload. I don't know, how are you all? A little upregulated. It's interesting to actually note how the body feels when inundated with so much information. And also how the body felt listening to Marian and Beata, as though a kind of cool breeze entered the room. And when Marian asked us to consider where we really are, not up in our minds, but in our bodies, on this sacred earth, with its long cultural history. And to use that sensing into the earth as a way to help us be really grounded in what Reverend Lawson and others have spoken to in our time together. How do we open our human heart to the truth of suffering? Not only the horrendous suffering that opens for us when we consider what happened in Hiroshima and Nagasaki 70 years ago. And we allow ourselves to access that truth, not just as a kind of concept, but looking at photographs, looking at film clips, talking to survivors, taking the dose of the poison at a sufficient rate where it becomes medicine. And also balancing that dose of suffering with this aspect of being really grounded, having the strength in our back to open to what is the truth of suffering. So I want to just make one other little remark, and I want to have us enter into a time just of, a few minutes, not overwhelming, but a few minutes of really dropping into what our experience is in this moment, whatever it is. So I'm in my early 70s. I just turned 73 last week. Thank you. I was a war baby. I think there are more war babies here. It's a hell of a deal to belong to a generation called the generation of war babies. So in the 60s, I had the opportunity to be very challenged in terms of how I was raised and what was happening in the social and political climate of the time. And that experience created immense polarization in me. I not only jeered as many people as I could jeer with a sense of righteousness and moral outrage, I was so internally polarized that I was almost paralyzed with anger. And I read a book by a very interesting man of that time, because I had deeply identified as a person of the 60s with social justice, environmental justice. I was deeply involved with SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. Many of you in the room probably were the same. I was at the Pentagon putting the chrysanthemum in the bayonets, talk about a meme. That was really powerful. And also walking down Fifth Avenue behind a young Vietnamese man who walked slower than I'm speaking now. And I remember the feeling that I had when the police directed us to kind of go another way so that the parade could continue. And that man was Thich Nhat Hanh. And this was mid-1960s. He had come to our country to urge us to stop. And someone once described him as a cloud with a machine in it. And what he manifested for me was a kind of perfect braid of two streams. One of those streams is very much in the spirit of what our Tewa sisters brought into the room today. What Reverend Lawson and Father John speak about, and others. What is it to have a deep contemplative base, being incredibly grounded, having the means to actually open to the truth of suffering, including our own internal processes, and at the same time to work to end suffering directly in terms of justice in the world, not just for our species, but for all species. Tree, cow, river, Tewa, Anglo, Mexican, Afro-American. So today has been a braid of those streams for us. And I'm inviting us to take the incredible amount of information as well as the sense, I think, of depletion, of discouragement, of demoralization that might be present for some of you. And also even numbness, avoidance, denial, rationalization that might be present for some of you, or upregulation, pain, suffering, trauma that might be present from you, and for some of you, and for us to just take a few moments to actually medicine ourselves with some qualities that are accessible to all of us, and that often we don't access. And the book that I read that sort of turned me, it was more like a meme, was by J. Krishnamurti, and the book's title was The Only Revolution. And of course, the second part of the sentence is the revolution within. And I don't believe that Krishnamurti was referring only to just being a navel gazer. But I think Krishnamurti was really pointing to how do we work with view, our worldview, the memes that have filtered into our psyche that create enormous biases where we feel turned away from the world. The only revolution is the revolution within. How do we actually cultivate a view of deep inclusivity that is based on principled compassion? And I say principled because a moral and ethical basis for what we do in the world is essential. And without that, our capacity to actually stand in the fire or to be a lotus blooming in the sea of fire, that capacity will not be present. And that image, lotus blooming in a sea of fire, the roots of the lotus are feeding in the mud of suffering. And the fire causes the lotus to break open. Can we develop that strength? We can. So I would like to invite us for a few moments to enter into the cool water, the cool breeze of practice. And for a few moments, like putting your hand on the tiller of a boat, let your attention rest on your attention. And direct your attention to a very simple thing. Perhaps the sensation of your feet on the floor as you sit in your chair. This earth, really connecting with this earth. Or the sensation of your sits bones on the chair, or if you're leaning back, the support of your chair. Some point of contact with this earth where you can feel support. A lot of times in what we do in the world of social justice, of environmental justice, the energy's rising up into some kind of fiery form. Fiery mannerism, to quote our sister. Let's see if we can drop into this sense of connectedness, of groundedness, and also support from the earth. And not be whipped up by the rhetoric of common polarizing communication, but just as an in-breath, gathering your attention on the exhale, dropping into the body, and really connecting with this earth, feeling grounding and support. And notice if you don't want to do it. And you can even say in a kind of internal way, sort of smiling, oh yeah, I have resistance throughout my life. Hello, old friend. I know you. And on the next in-breath, gathering your attention. And on the out-breath, dropping into the body, really inviting that sensibility and connecting and feeling support. Our ability to do this is really important. Just like when Marian was talking, we all of a sudden could feel the presence of the earth. It was a sacred moment for many of us in this room. This moment is sacred. The next moment, also sacred. Even in the midst of the complex conditions that many of you face, that many of us face, in our work, in our service to others, in our service to the earth. Gathering our attention on the inhale, on the exhale, dropping into the body. Feeling the support of just being grounded. You know, in the world of Christianity, there's a kind of blessing in stopping. A kind of coming home for an instant, a way of letting the nervous system cool down. And gently shift your attention to your back, whether your back is afflicted or whether for a moment you're distracted by some kind of sound in the room. But how easy it is to go into distraction. Just see how we're just pulled off. Absolutely pulled out of our experience in an instant. And that is one of the ways our attention is captured by corporations, constantly ungrounding us. Did you notice what happened to the body and the mind and the heart when that phone went off? Interesting, huh? Just notice that and come back. In a certain way, our attention is the medium for us to transform the suffering in this world and in our lives. And again, notice how distraction arises, and you just begin again. In breath, gathering your attention. Out breath, dropping into the body. Now move your attention to your back. Whether your back is not great or whatever, it's a metaphor for a quality of mind that we call equanimity. And it doesn't mean passivity. It's actually that strength that allows us to uphold ourselves in the midst of any situation. To be balanced, to be pliable, to see the truth of suffering on all sides of the equation. To hold our ground. And that mental quality is called equanimity. Just as the mental quality of being really grounded is stability, this is equanimity. As one wonderful teacher said, it's our capacity to care for all beings equally. Strong back. We need your strong back. And it's that capacity for equanimity, that strong back, that allows us to have an open front, to really receive all of the suffering, the hungry ghosts, the difficulties, to be open to that. That we're able to perceive in our lives and in this world. Our capacity for compassion, principled compassion, healthy compassion, strong back, soft front. And you know, for many, it's strong front. We have an incredible system of defense in our country, in the world, our military, our bombs, strong front and soft back, fear. And this work is about shifting the meme in our culture, in our society, in global society, to strong back, soft front, instead of this incredibly defended front and soft back, fear. As we take this nice deep breath in the body and really let the whole organism cool down, feeling grounded, perhaps some of us. And working with that sensibility of the relationship between equanimity and compassion. Strong back, soft front. And from this base, touching into why we're really here. And I don't think it's difficult for anyone in this room to consider a situation where we feel really connected and that our service, our practice is about addressing the truth of suffering and working to transform it. And for just a few moments, I really urge you, again, thinking of Marion's words, of Erica's words, of Medea's words, of Father John, of Reverend Lawson. Some situation that's really grips you and that primes that sense of dedication. And notice if we can't, we're kind of in a state of disconnect. And that's what's up for us right now. Not to turn away from that, simply to be aware. And from this base of touching into our motivation, our deep intention, and from this base of grounding, for a few moments, consider what will really serve. How do we want to engage as peacemakers in our own lives, the life of our families, the lives of our community members, and the life of this world? What will really serve? Again, notice if you tend toward distraction and see if you can just gently and firmly bring yourself back. Breath deep in the body, strong back, soft front. Why am I really here? How can I serve to end suffering? And just completing this simple contemplation, whatever good that has arisen for you, even just one breath's worth of being present, a feeling internal ease. Just like you can't bank love. It only works if you give it away. Whatever good that has arisen for you, send it to an individual or groups of individuals. It could be the workers at Los Alamos. It could be the people of the Pueblo. It could be the men in the slaughterhouse. It could be the men and women at war. It could be the big game hunter. See if you can send love and mercy. Just let it move from you to those whom you consider to be most afflicted by ignorance, by sickness, by misunderstanding, by violence. So thank you for your practice so much. Thank you. And as we come into a brief, more discursive moment, I just want you to see if we can somehow sustain the quality of respect, of dignity, of presence, of courage, even as we, in these next hours after dinner, explore the issues. See if we can sustain that quality of heart that is characterized by real courage. Yeah, strong back, soft front, really grounded, disarming ourselves. Thank you. So, John, I prepared 6 pages of notes, which I will relieve our good friends from. I think we have been blessed with so much information and such rich strategies. And it's to understand that compassion is an expression within awakening that points to the most dedicated and courageous kind of social action that all of you are engaged in. It is not mushy. It is strong back, open front. It has a quality of attention that is searingly clear. It is characterized by fundamental prosociality, by a sense of real care and concern for all beings, not just an in-group, whether the in-group is a nation or our family or women. We have to really extend our compassion throughout all beings. That is what principled compassion is. And it is strengthened by the deepest kind of motivation that is, how can I engage the world and my life in the world to help others awaken from suffering? How can I do that? And it could be as simple as turning the light out when you leave a room, or changing your dietary preferences, or standing in front of one tank in Tiananmen Square, or holding your hands up covered in blood in front of Condoleezza Rice. It's in the granularity of our life. It's in the details of our life. The kind of moral alignment that allows us to be grounded and to act from a really clean place. And like any boat that we take to any destination, if you've ever been on a sailboat, you're constantly tacking. You think you're heading this way, but the winds are coming in another direction, and you shift your direction. That kind of pliability, the capacity to begin again and again, the capacity to show up in the winds of change, is what our practice is about. Whether we pray or meditate, or whether we're a mother or father with our children. And part of it also has to do with our courage to lift our eyes off our screens and to see how the digital world is co-opting your attention and burning so many people out and putting memes inside of the psychic continuum which disallow the kind of clarity which is needed today. And I use social platforms. Just because I'm in my 70s doesn't mean I don't see the power of our voice across social platforms. But I will not have my attention disrupted constantly because I know the cost of that in terms of clarity. And if we don't have that clarity, we cannot see reality clearly. We cannot see things clearly. We cannot have the kind of strategic power that Reverend Lawson was sharing with us this morning and yesterday evening. We need people who are courageous, who are clear, whose psyches have not been consumed by our social media, and at the same time to use our social media as a vehicle for transmitting memes related to social and environmental justice. Anyway, don't get me started. My poor friends down here know the spirit of the 60s, of feminism, of social revolution, it's in my bones. And how do I use that spirit skillfully in this time? So, Father John, you rock. And just one thing I want to tell you. Erica said, we need millions of people, but only 3%. But I think about A.J. Musty, one guy sitting in front of the White House night after night. You know what? It's a lesson for all of us. One guy sitting in front of the White House night after night during the war in Vietnam. And this New York Times reporter who said there are only 80 of us. Day before, New York Times never could count, so never mind. It's like, Fernanda, for God's sakes, that was ridiculous. But never mind. There were 40 people from Upaya, so, there were way more than 80, as it was reported in the Times. Stupid, but never mind. God, where was I going? Hold on. Oh, yeah. A.J. Musty sitting in front of the White House, with his little candle, all alone. Some New York Times reporter comes up to him and says, hey, man, you think that's going to make a difference? And Musty turned to the reporter and he said, I don't want my country to change my heart and mind in that way. And actually, I'm not doing the best version. Do you remember? How does it go, John? I don't want to. In other words, one person, one kid in front of a tank, A.J. Musty in front of the White House. If there's only one person, and I know that won't be true at Los Alamos tomorrow, as it is, show up. We show up, whether it's 1 million or one, because our moral compass is in the direction of peace. So, John, I thank you for showing up again and again and again, and I thank all of you. I know you are carrying so much injustice in your heart that you want to resolve for all beings. May it be so in our lifetime, but if not, we at least showed up. Thank you.
Roshi Joan Halifax, in Upaya. A deep bow for Roshi Joan. Thank you so very much, friends. We'll be back at 7:30. Go in a spirit of peace, as Roshi has taught us. Have a wonderful evening, a nice meal. We'll be back at 7:30 for the closing panel. Peace.